They've been on this planet far longer than we have. They're all different, but they all share the same goal. To find the biggest, baddest villain to serve. Finding a master was easy. Keeping a master. That's where things got tricky. Nope, it wasn't easy for these guys. But nonetheless, they kept on looking.
Scarlet!
Don't you Scarlet me. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I hate you.
Guys, cut it out. This is really unprofessional.
Morning. So I asked this question. We ask this question every week, got on film. But I really do want to know, because there's been like different feedback on Minions. How many of you actually saw Minions? Okay, actually not that many of you. Less than this. Hey, you saw Minions? Cool. For those of you who have not seen Minions, I'll give you a quick synopsis of the movie. It's very quick. These little yellow creatures, these minions, it's a prequel to Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2. I love them. They're these fantastic little creatures that have existed since the beginning of time. Now, throughout the movie and throughout history, their goal, their purpose is to find the ultimate villain, like the baddest villain there could possibly be, and serve that villain wholeheartedly. Now, they finally find the ultimate villain. Her name is Scarlet Overkill. And after getting to be her minion, she gives them a task to do to help her rule England. They don't do it exactly the way that she likes it, and she spends the rest of the movie trying to punish, trying to destroy, trying to kill them off. The end. That's the whole story. Like, there's not that much more to it. And I watched this movie opening weekend because I knew I was going to be talking about Minions. I'm like, oh man, what am I supposed to say about this movie? And I'm like, the Minions, they're so loyal, and they're so faithful, and they really persevere time and time again, and they serve wholeheartedly, like with the servant's heart, and I just didn't feel good about it. Like, as I was trying to prepare, what do I say about Minions? It just didn't sit well within me. And so I went to work, and I was talking to a couple of my coworkers, and one of them says to me, she says, well, humans aren't minions. We are not minions. The Merriam-Webster definition of a minion is this: someone who is not powerful or important and who obeys the orders of a powerful leader or boss. That is the identity of a minion. Not important, just obey someone more important. I'm not a big deal, just follow someone who is a big deal. The identity of a minion. But we're not minions. In fact, all this, it constantly says things like this: for you did not receive a spirit that makes you a slave to fear, but you received the spirit of sonship, and by him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are God's children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. So we're not minions. We're children. We're beloveds. We are part of this family. We are adopted into God's family. We're not minions. But I think a lot of us live like we are. And when I think about this minion identity, this minion mentality, it's the idea, the identity of I'm not important, I have to serve someone who is. I think about Acts chapter 17. Now, in the book of Acts, it tells the story of this guy whose name was previously Saul, going around, killing off the early Christians, hated the early Christian church, encountered Jesus, everything changes. Spends the rest of his life now with a new name, Paul, and goes around telling everyone he possibly can about this guy named Jesus, that he's the one and only way. He lived, he died, he resurrected. Now, a lot of people don't like it, stir up agitation, stir up rumors. He is now separated from his ministry team, and he's waiting in Athens, Greece for his friends. And he's in Athens, he's looking around, he's walking around. And if we had to have walked around Athens at that day and time, it probably would have been breathtaking. Like they were surrounded by these statues and these aesthetically beautiful images of their gods, their Greek gods that just surrounded the city. It would have been amazing. And yet he walks around, and it says he's greatly distressed. And in Acts 17, starting with verse 16, it says why. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but asking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Now what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have even said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by man's design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead." When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. A few men became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. So Athens, Greece at this time was the hub for new ideas, philosophy, purpose, wisdom, knowledge, truth, religion, all this stuff. And I'm reading it, and honestly, I don't think that they were that different from us here and now and today. You know, this idea of, I just want to know the purpose of life. I want to know, is God real? Is God good? Does God care about me? The same questions over and over. And they were so bent on this pursuit of religion and pursuit of understanding that Paul says they missed it. These minions, they were so driven by this pursuit to find a master that when they finally found Scarlet, they didn't stop to get to know who she even was. And ultimately, she was the wrong master for them because she spends the rest of the movie trying to destroy them and kill them off. Just the pursuit of believing in God, believing in higher beings, but not really knowing. The Athenians, what they would do is, in order to not offend any god that may or may not exist, they built several altars and sacrifices and wrote the inscriptions to, we don't know who you are, we just don't want to offend you, we want to make sure that we're okay. Because if we don't know God, then we fall into just the religious mindset. What instructions do I have to follow? What rules do I have to obey? How can I look religious on the outside? How can I just not offend God? And it's a focus on outward behavior. If your relationship with God is about your behavior, then something has gone wrong. We have thought over the years that our job in the church is to focus on behavior. Years ago, I was serving with a youth conference, and there was a team of us pastors working together on it. And in the middle of service, one of the pastors stands up and storms out of the room, clearly agitated and upset. And I'm like, oh man, what's gonna happen? And it was just moments later, I'm getting a text, come into conference room C, we need to have a meeting. So I walk into conference room C, and there's a round table filled with all these reverends, these ordained reverends, and they're listening to the audio of the sermon, and they're kind of discussing among themselves. And one of them says to the others, I don't even know why we're here. All he's pretty much saying is not to judge other people. Like, don't look at the speck in other people's eyes when you have the log in your own. What's the big deal? And this one pastor that stormed out of the room says, no. Our job as the church, our job as pastors, is to tell people what their sins are and make them stop. I was really thankful that no one else in that room agreed with him, because that's not my job. That's not the church's job. And for you who profess Christ as Lord and Savior, that's not your job. Our job is to do that. So that when you look at me, you're not looking at my finger, but you're just looking at whatever or whomever I'm pointing at. That's our job, for people to look at us and just look right to Jesus. And sometimes pointing to Jesus is keeping people accountable, and it is saying, hey, come on, there's something so much better for you. Or these things are just chaining you down. God has a purpose for you. But ultimately, pointing to Jesus is to offer them unconditional, unfailing, like as we sang earlier today, unfailing love. And as I've said in the past, unconditional love is love when the conditions are not met. That's pointing to Jesus. So what Paul was saying is, you guys believe in gods, but if you knew this God, this is the one that died and resurrected for you. This Jesus, this God of the universe, the God who made the world and everything in it, is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. God is not created by our finite hands. He's not contained in our finite temples. He's not even fully comprehended and understood in our finite minds. And because of this vastness, because of this eternal existence of God, it creates this beautiful space of pursuing, of understanding, of yearning. And I believe in each of us, he has placed that longing in our heart, this yearning to understand who God is. And it can only be satisfied in him, to reach out for him, to seek him and find him. But the minion identity doesn't sit still. It doesn't reach out. It doesn't seek. It doesn't find. The minion identity is, God, are you happy? God, are you okay? God, what should I do? God, what's next for me? God, did I do the right thing today? God, are you pleased? God, am I a failure? God, what do you want me to do next? God, what is my calling? And it's exhausting. And that was my prayer life for years. Well, and I was early on in ministry. I was serving as a youth pastor at a church. And when your job is praying for people and that's your prayer life, it's exhausting. I was so burnt out. I was so done. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I remember my church saw it, and I don't know too many other young youth pastors that they'll give a paid 3-month sabbatical for. But my church recognized that I was not okay. So I flew out to Kansas City for a couple months, and for 3 months, my prayer was, God, what is my calling? God, what do you want me to do next? God, when this is over, do you want me to stay for another 3 months? God, should I go back? God, should I switch seminaries? God, what do you want me to do? God, when am I going to get married? God, when are you going to send me a boyfriend? God, what am I supposed to do here? Every night, that was my prayer. And every time there was an invitation for prayer, like I was the first one up there. Like I pushed people out of my way. And if I saw that it was like one of like the leaders, I would like inch my way over to try and get prayer from them. And I would wait. And if they ever ask, what do you want us to pray? I'm like, what is my calling? I want to know what my calling is. I want to know what God wants from me. And for 3 months, all these different people, every time I got prayer, it was the same thing. God really loves you. God really likes you. God is delighted in you. I hated it. It did not answer my prayers at all. In my mind, I'm thinking, you can't hear from God. Why am I even up here? That's a total cop-out of a prayer. Just tell me you don't hear anything and let's move on. And I kept going back to, God, where's my calling? God, what do you want me to do? God, where's my husband? These things over and over and over in my mind. And so finally, it was like the second to last night of the whole internship, and I'm sitting there in class, and it was one of those moments as if heaven really opened, and I felt like I was hearing God speak to me. All my thoughts, all my emotions poured into this one sentence in my mind that said, for 3 months, whenever anyone would come near you, I would just say to them, I really love her. I really like her. For 3 months, that's all I wanted you to know, because you don't get it. You don't have to try and please me. You already do. For 3 months, all he wanted me to do was to sit with him, not figure out what my calling was. My calling is to love and be loved by God. That's it. Maybe I'm assigned to do certain things like preach and teach and things, but my calling is to be his and his alone. And we talk about, every single week we come up here and we talk about silence and solitude and Sabbath. You've heard us talk about these things, and we say it over and over and over. And it's not just a fancy thing that we say. It's not just because we don't know what next steps to give you, so we're going to give you those. It's because those are so important to knowing and reaching God. The first couple times I've tried to do silence and solitude, I hated it. Because when I was alone by myself, when no one else was around, when no one was listening, when I didn't have to think about anything, it was just anxieties, worries, angry thoughts. And I thought, if people saw what I was really thinking, if people saw how many worries I had, if people saw how messed up I was, they would see that I'm a complete failure, that I'm a total fraud. But it was in that solitude, it was in that silence with myself that, one, I discovered I had a very unhealthy relationship with myself. But two, despite that, the Lord wanted to sit with me in those moments. The God of the universe, Jesus, wants to sit and be found by us. Why? Because as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. The minions, when they found Scarlet, they couldn't just be with her. They had to audition. They had to compete. There were all these other villains that they found. And she said, whoever wins this competition can get to be my minions. And the minions won. And they earned their place with her, but then later they didn't do something that she liked, and so she spends the rest of the movie punishing them. The minion identity feels like we have to constantly earn, constantly strive, constantly prove that we belong there. We feel like life is just this large competition, this large audition to be in the kingdom of heaven. And when we have this mindset of earning, of striving, of performing, and when I say performing, I mean living your life for the audience of other people, of how they see you, how they perceive you, of what they think of you. And when you live in that lifestyle, it's exhausting, and it's never good enough, and soon you start gaining this perfectionist mentality. I have a couple images that I want to show you this morning, and I'm just going to warn you, some of you are going to be pretty uncomfortable with it. Oh no, right? Oh no, like just turn it a little bit, seal it down, and everything would be okay. Like the lines would have been perfectly straight. Like what's up with that? Just one Pepsi in a Coca-Cola packaging. Like why is that Pepsi even there? That is not center, and that is not left. Just one more penny. Just one more penny, and I can give you 2 20s, and we're good. You don't have to flush out and try to find me that extra penny as change. And the puppies. This is so cute. Just get in order. Like, it would have been perfect. Black, white, black, white, black, white puppies. Why? And when I saw these images on one of those websites, BuzzFeed or whatever, the caption for a lot of them was, you only had one job. You only had to do this one little thing. And it's funny. Some of those images, it's like nails on a chalkboard for our eyes. It's like, oh, man, ugh. It's funny, but it also points to we have little grace for mistakes. We have little grace for errors. See, when our life is about striving, of performing, of showing, then we expect others to be like that too. Have some respect. Turn the sewer tile in the correct angle, right? And when we have little grace for other people, we have very little grace for ourselves. This idea of, all right, I got this job, I'm in this position, I'm in this spot, I'm going to show them that I can do it. I'm not just going to show them I can do it, I'm going to show them that I could do it better than anyone else, that I deserve this, I deserve to be here in this moment. Not only am I going to do this perfectly, I'm also going to take on your job and show them that I could do all this stuff. I'm fantastic, I'm amazing. I'm going to show them. Oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I can't do this. But why is no one else doing this? Why am I the only one working so hard? Why am I the only one who's striving? Why aren't they doing more work? I'm not going to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I'm a failure. Oh, good, they like it. They think I did a good job. I must have done something right. Let me continue to show them that I can do these things well. I could do it even better than the last time. And it's this constant, exhausting struggle, this cycle of shame and performing, perfectionism, shame, over and over and over again. You know, the Minions movie, it did not get the best feedback. For those of you who saw it, a lot of people, we were like, oh, what was the point? That was kind of a waste of time, etc. And one of the arguments about why The Minions is not the best movie is because it doesn't have the best plot. It's not a thick plot. It's not suspenseful. It's pretty predictable. It's a children's movie. You're going to figure out what happens. But I was talking to one of my friends yesterday, and I asked her, I said, hey, did you see the Minions movie? And she's like, yeah, I loved it. I was like, what did you love about the Minions movie? And she said, well, they're just so cute. I just enjoy watching them. The Minion identity is, I have to show, I have to prove, I have to earn. The offspring identity is just enjoying God's provision, enjoying God, enjoying each other. Not having to have this great plot for our lives, not having to show people that we're worth their times. Because ultimately, what's really interesting about the Minions, even when she tries to kill them off, they've existed since the beginning of time, and they continue to exist. The Minions were meant for eternity. And yet the masters that they had in their lives continue to die off. The masters they had in their lives were very temporal. And I would argue that you and I, we have multiple masters in our lives, temporal things. And I could say it's money, or it's fame, or it's a good job, or it's a good education, or it's a good family. But I think deeper than that, I think the core desires, these core masters of our hearts, the desire for acceptance, the desire for approval, the desire for recognition, the desire for safety, for security. These are the things that rule our hearts. These are the temporal things. Walking into an offspring identity requires vulnerability, because it requires you to look at this person you've created, this earner, this performer in you, and say, I don't need you. The Lord already accepts me. The Lord already approves of me. If I don't do this project perfectly, if I don't meet that deadline, I'm still worth something. When the Minions messed up, quote unquote, and if you saw the movie, they didn't really mess up. But when it felt like they messed up, Scarlett spends the rest of the movie trying to kill them. When you and I messed up, Jesus came and died. That's the difference between a minion identity and an offspring identity. It's time for us to make Jesus our master. It's time for us to know who this God is. A lot of us may believe, and a lot of us may know about God, but do you know him? Because this Jesus, this resurrected one, the God of the universe, just wants us to be okay, enjoy us, and bring us home safely. Years ago, years and years and years ago, I would spend almost all my weekends in New York City, getting drunk, partying, trying to numb whatever feeling, whatever void I had, trying to find acceptance, trying to find recognition, trying to find approval. And there was one night in particular where I'm at an Asian club party, and I do the one thing that you don't do in a club. I tripped in front of a bouncer. Now, if you've been to a club, you know what happens next. Okay, some of you are smiling, okay? So you guys know what happens next. Next thing I know, there's this giant arm, and he's like pulling me up off the ground, and he's like, "You need to get out. You're drunk. You're nasty. You need to get out of here." And I remember thinking, and saying to him, "No, you can't kick me out. I'm a woman by myself. You can't kick me out into the streets of New York in the middle of winter by myself. Help me. You have to help me find my friends." He's like, "Fine." So he walks me around the entire room trying to find all my friends. And I'm sorry, I know we say this all the time. If all Asians look alike when you're sober, imagine trying to find your friends after a couple drinks. I could not find my friends. It's just the truth of what happened. I literally went up to each person, "Are you my friend?" And no. And so finally, he's like, "I don't have time for this anymore, leave." Luckily and thankfully, the hotel lobby let me stay there while I try to figure things out. My phone was dead. Use their phone, try to call any numbers I could think of. We don't remember phone numbers anymore. Do you know your friend's phone number? Probably not. And I'm just dialing random numbers, hoping something will come to mind, and nothing. So I sit down, and I eventually just fall asleep. And it felt like moments, but it must have been hours later, because the next thing I know, someone's shaking me violently awake, and they're screaming my name, "Jennifer, get up." And I look up, and there standing over me is my 6'1" Hungarian law enforcement father. This is the man that since the age of 4 has been my dad. I can't tell you the amount of shame that just took over my entire being. And he didn't say a word, and we just walked right to his car. And I sat in his car wondering, what is he doing here? I wish anyone else in the universe, it could have been anyone else, just not him. And I sat there, and I'm trying not to even move a single muscle, just trying not to get attention to myself, just hoping this moment will go away. It's about an 1.5-hour drive from the city into my parents' house. And about 30 minutes in, I feel him grab my hand. And I look up at him, and it felt like I was seeing his eyes for the first time. And he looked at me. I could tell the worriedness in his eyes, and he said to me, "I'm so glad you're okay. Let's just get you home." The spirit of adoption is not angry at you when you mess up. The spirit of adoption says, "I just want you to be okay. It's time to take you home." Please pray with me.